In Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade.
That's what we were told. Most Americans never believed Lee Oswald was the lone gunman, for excellent reasons. In fact, there were at least 6 shooters who fired from 8 to 10 shots or more who are identified here. We have, finally, the solution to the greatest murder mystery in history, laid out for the world to see, proof after proof after proof. Photos were faked, the body was changed, x-rays were altered, the home movies were fixed. 15 experts contribute to a 529-page book with 1,037 photos and diagrams in black and white and color.
Hi, this is Gary King. If you'd like JFK, who, how, and why, and would like to support the new JFK show, then go to patriotradiobooks.com. That's patriotradiobooks.com.
Welcome to the new JFK Show, number 158. We have a couple of quick announcements. If you're into JFK research, we do rerun these shows on Firehorse Network 24/7. So there's JFK shows running around the clock if you just go to Firehorse Network. As far as the books are concerned, all books have gone out, and everyone should be getting them very, very soon. All right, so we're going to turn it over to Larry Rivera. Tonight we have a more than full house. We've got Don Fox, Jim Fetzer, Larry Rivera, myself, and also Dennis Camino. So we're going to turn it over to Larry, and we've got some photo analysis that's in the news today, and it seems to be a hot story at the moment. I think
all right, this is from Larry's blog, the Fred Noonan Overlays. On 7/9/17, the History Channel premiered the Amelia Earhart documentary, Amelia Earhart, The Lost Evidence. Former Executive Assistant FBI Director Sean Henry stars in this trans-Pacific adventure as he goes on location to the Marshall Islands in search of evidence that will help corroborate the authenticity of an old photograph found by happenstance by retired U.S. Treasury agent Les Kinney, in which classified ONI, Office of Naval Intelligence documents, appear to have been misfiled by the National Archives. Here's of the general map of the area in the South Pacific. Then we see,
what's important here, Jim, is the population. There are only 900 people there in 1937. So the chance of 2 Caucasian people, in 1937 there, I believe, would be extremely, extremely low.
It just wouldn't happen other than by some bizarre set of circumstances.
Yeah, the probability. And I mentioned that because now there seems to have been damage control put out by NPR, regarding this photo.
Now, here's a photograph that has gone viral throughout the internet. Take a look there. Larry, you want to describe some of the features of the photograph?
Yeah. Obviously, this is a dock, and there are boats there. They're obviously native boats, but in the background, you see a couple of steamers. And the one to the right is where a barge, which is being towed by the Koshu, I believe is the name of the ship, announces, is supposed to be the Earhart's plane, the Electra that she was flying. Go through this information here because it's very, very compelling, and I think we're going to enjoy it here. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you scroll a little further, according to former Executive Assistant FBI Director Sean Henry, this could be the biggest government cover-up of all time, which is happy horse shit, considering the moon landing, JFK, 9/11, the idea this could be the biggest cover-up of all time is ridiculous. Author's note, really, Sean, have you ever heard of how the national security state, that is the government, covered up the assassination of John Kennedy and framed Lee Oswald in the process? a cover-up which continues to this very day. Perhaps Mr. Henry would like to take up that investigation next. Henry's very first order of business consisted in establishing the provenance and authenticity of the photograph in order to eliminate the possibility of it being the result of a hoax or an artificial composition. That's actually a pretty good version of the photograph. Dennis, let me draw on your expertise. What would be the best ways of authenticating the photograph before we turn to the discussion?
Well, the thing that you probably would want to do is, that works the best for me, is to invert or turn this into a negative and look for any unusual signs of cut and paste operations in the picture. Now, usually when somebody has just plopped something in, it's pretty apparent that there's I call it the event horizon of where they pasted the new part of the picture into the shot. And if you look at a photograph and break it up into quadrants, I guess the best way to maybe start, or 6 or 8 pieces, and then analyze each chunk after you blow it up, after inverting it, you have a much better chance of spotting non-native parts of the photograph. And then, of course, you can always flip it the other way and go back to the non-negative state to examine even closer to see if you're maybe potentially wrong, because there are some photographs where, because of shading and lights and stuff like that, and natural things, you'll get an edge that doesn't look exactly like it should in a photograph. But the other thing I would tell people to do is look at proportion as well.
If I were to chunk this out in a naive way, Dennis, I'd say across the top you get 3 chunks. You got from the right to in between the 2 parties where there's virtually a vertical gap, then over to the pole, another, and then the rest of the way. And then the bottom, the foreground, could more or less be a 4th chunk. Would that be roughly right?
Yeah, and you have to, when you look at a photograph like this, the first time I've ever seen it, it behooves you to probably spend a little bit more than 15 or 20 minutes to take a really good hard look at it, especially in the light of the fact that now so much stuff is getting floated as what I call an obfuscator of what's going on in current contemporaneous times with the country. So I'm not saying that this is an interesting time for this stuff to pop up. I'm actually pretty glad it did. I followed this Amelia Earhart mystery for a great number of years, not because I was a fan of hers, but because a lot of elements didn't make a whole lot of sense. And there's been a number of different pieces that you've watched on television where I call them docudramas, where they introduced the incompetence of the navigator and the fact that she was a terrible pilot and all these other things, and throw it all out there. And I wasn't alive when she was flying aircraft, so I have no clue whether she was competent or she wasn't. And I don't really want to rely on something that somebody puts on the Talmud Vision to tell me whether she was. So I got more of an interest in getting to the bottom of what really happened. And it didn't make sense that the radio beacon was not available for navigation, because anybody that's flown aircraft over great distances, including huge expanses of water, you definitely want to be able to use a device called automatic direction finding, or ADF, where you have a long wire, a sense wire, and then a loop. On these old aircraft, you actually had to manipulate the loop sometimes and tune it to the null point where you could kind of get an idea where the actual station origin was at. So the newer equipment does it automatically, and I work on them all day long in the shop. So it's ironic that on such an important occasion as this flight, that any number of factors contributed to the beacon being shut down at a time when it was absolutely imperative that she have a beacon to home on. So not saying it was just gross incompetence, it just didn't make any sense to me that...
Looking at it, I see 7 figures there. There's a tall, dark guy first, then there's a shorter woman in the dress, then there's a woman kneeling with her back to us, then there's a man with a kind of a bandana around his waist, then there's a taller man who's mostly obscured by what appears to be a woman, and then on the left, finally, number 7, a taller man holding a pole or being supported by a pole. where according to the analysis of the photograph number 3, the woman with her back toward us is supposed to be Amelia Earhart, looking over at a Japanese tug or whatever that may or may not be towing her plane, and the individual on the far left is her navigator, Noonan. Larry, is that right?
Yeah, that's information that Sean Henry has brought forth, in the documentary, and this is something that they're touting as, brand new evidence. And if you look at the documentary, it's almost an hour and a half long, and they go all, through the Marshall Islands, and they go interviewing witnesses and everything, trying to bring about the whole scenario and how the plane ended up on that barge. But what we're going to find now, we're going to review now exactly what Dennis was talking about, 5 different tests that this gentleman, Doug Carner, performed on the photograph. And that's exactly what comes next. Go ahead. After obtaining the
authenticity of the photograph. After obtaining the photograph from Kinney, Henry visited photographic expert Don Carner to confirm its authenticity. And here's an image of him with Doug Carner. Using a combination of computer analysis and special imaging software, which he helped design, Carner was able to put the photograph through 5 different tests, which according to him confirmed the absolute authenticity thereof. These were error level analysis, noise level analysis, principal component analysis, gradient analysis, and minimum maximum analysis. The fact that all of these tests showed no significant deviation that would suggest tampering seems to validate its authenticity. Dennis, do you want to comment on those types of tests?
Yeah, those are the
they're all pretty valid. Basically what I do manually is more or less kind of a composite of all of these, but it requires more human interface than a computer actually being able to zero in on it. Now, I'm not saying that it's invalid. I think it's a pretty good thing to have a tool that gives you at least a good starting point, because I would imagine that once a person looks at what the computer has decided has been patched in and fabricated, photographed, then it gives you even more of a way to zero in on it and see what else you can find in that area. Because once you find the crack in the whole thing, it's not a matter of, well, that cinches it. It just it cuts down the time element from something in the order of 10 to 15 hours down to a matter of an hour or so to really get a handle on the authenticity of the picture, and it's a pretty good tool.
Well, you can see right here, this screen shows the original photo in the top left, and then the ELA, error level analysis, noise level analysis, bottom left, principal component analysis, then gradient, and finally minimum max. Do you want to comment on each of those types of tests and what they would tell us, Dennis?
Well, basically, if you look at a photograph, I don't know if anybody has old black and white photos from their familial archives that have been passed down to them that are very old, where you flip them over, the backs are brown because the paper has aged for so very long. And then you take something like that, and a lot of us have gone to the lengths of scanning old photos using a flatbed scanner. Of course, some flatbed scanners are better for the job than you can imagine. As a matter of fact, I was just looking at scanners that are more suited for this kind of analysis, getting to a photograph where the actual scanned image after it's been printed is actually much more clear and error-free than the original. Not because it was intended to happen like that, but because the way that light is seen by the infrared diodes that are part of the scanning head is a little bit different than the way a human eye sees it, and it allows a computer to adjust things that would take us hours to probably get a good grip on and get the photo enhanced to the point where you can really see it with better clarity than the original. I compel people, if you do a scan of any photograph, that first version that you have is not what you're going to end up with in the end. You're going to do multi-levels of enhancement, you're going to blow up the picture as best you can without getting to the point where all you're looking at is noise, because as you might imagine, if we were to look at what would be considered to be pixel depth on this thing, and just a matter of a couple pixels in width, you ultimately end up with something you can't really tell anything from anyway. So once you get a good working scan done with a good high-quality flatbed scanner, basically a Canon, or even probably some of the higher-end ones that they use in the commercial industry. Once you get something like that, you can do all kinds of things, but I compel people that once they get that initial scan done, they save it, not alter it, but leave it as the original to start over again if necessary. So I end up rescanning and rescanning. But there are filters that you can put over a photograph when you scan it to bring out certain components, even with a black and white photo. So
isn't that what's going on here, Dennis?
Basically, the computer is synthesizing an actual real filter. In other words, in the old days, you used different types of, yellow, green, blue, red filters when you were looking at a picture to bring out certain features and to get some other parts of the picture out of the way so you could do a better analysis. But a computer can do any number of things much more rapidly than the good old-fashioned way of flipping pieces.
Go ahead, Larry.
Sure, of course. Larry, yes.
I just wanted to mention that the one test here that shows how light is reflecting off of the different components of the photograph is the gradient. And if you were to superimpose, for example, a figure of somebody on that dock who wasn't really supposed to be there, who wasn't there originally, when you ran the gradient test, that person would come out completely dark, black. Also, I want to mention that Dennis, I know that Dennis uses another technique called gamma levels, and that's not mentioned here. And that would also be a very useful test to use. That would be our sixth test. That would also confirm the authenticity of the photograph. Maybe Dennis can run that one through, since we have the image, How about that one, Dennis, the gamma?
Well, what I would do is I would probably, if somebody's got a real good high quality copy of this picture digitally, I'd like to get it forwarded to me so I could do what I can with it. But when you when you change the gamma level and brighten up a picture to lighten up the dark shadow areas, you're much more likely to see an edge from a cut and paste job than if you leave everything black. Because even though it looks absolutely black, that's not really true. To your naked eye, it is.
And it would also bring out the airbrushing, wouldn't it?
That's right. You can see, by the way, when we're talking about Zapruder, you can see where they basically just used a sponge that was soaked in black sepia ink and dabbed it onto the original photography to alter it. But that was back in the 60s. Now there's many techniques that you could use to fake a picture. But what I would probably want to know more about is the picture that we're talking about. Who has the original photo?
Right.
And who could we trust to do an actual process analysis to look at the chemical composition, so that we can basically date the photograph and tell when it was, because nobody would have taken that photo so many decades ago and then suddenly, without warning, grab the can of film or the plate and run it to a place to get it processed. That doesn't make any sense. It would have been processed probably within a very short period of time from the time that it was shot. Not saying it would have been done inside of a year necessarily, but probably so. And if you can time date the actual photograph by virtue of the chemicals used and age of the paper and the actual paper itself, and all the things that make the photograph a physical thing, if you can do that properly, you can authenticate the photograph much more thoroughly than just looking at an image. An image is great. You can use all these tools, but it's very, very important to be able to go back to the original photograph, send it to a reputable lab. Don't tell them what you want, just in the sense of what it is. You don't want to give anybody a bias about what they're looking at, but just say, I'd like you to tell me the composition of this actual process. I want you to tell me what chemicals were used, the age of the paper, and give me as much information physically as you can about the photograph. And I want you not to alter the photograph. You know, in other words, it takes a lot of trust to ship the original to a lab who, if they were well informed about what it is, could easily destroy it and destroy a piece of evidence that everybody wants to look at. So you definitely want to send it to somebody that's both trustworthy and neutral. So they'll send you back your original. It's basically only got just the edges of it chipped off or cut off, so you can run it through a chromatograph and see what it is, you know, to be sure that we're dealing with old paper, not something that was used in the 1960s, because I don't believe that this photograph would have been developed in the 60s. It would have been developed pretty close to the time it was shot.
Right.
Excellent commentary. Facial recognition. Next, Henry went to see facial recognition expert Kent Gibson, who also put the photograph through a series of tests, which will now be discussed. And there's a Kent Gibson. During the program, we are shown via proportional comparisons by Kent Gibson images that appear to confirm the person in question seems to have the same physical characteristics as Earhart. In this exercise, he does a 3-image photogrammetric comparison. And of course, photogrammetric is applying the mathematics to the analysis of photographs.
And I want to mention that, Jim, here that this is very, very skeptical as far as I'm concerned, because these are 3 images, the 2 images obviously of Earhart, you know, to the right and to the left, and all they're doing here is trying to match, you know, her backside there, and the angles, really, the perspectives are not really exact. So right. I have a little bit of I'm a little bit skeptical about this one, but go ahead.
But roughly, if you talk about her build, the breadth of her shoulders, her head, its shape in relation, you know, the way, the tilt of her body. Look at the one on the right and the one on the left. That looks a whole lot like it could very well be the same woman.
Yeah, I guess the point here was to show that she had like broad shoulders, you know,
yeah,
a slight, you know, even though she was tall, she was, you know, not skinny, but slight, you know, and so, you know, it's just the build is what he's really looking at.
Do you know her approximate height and weight, Larry?
Yeah, I think she was like 5'10" or 5'9" or something like that.
Tall for a woman.
Yeah.
And her weight?
Wow, 130 maybe at the most.
You think that's slender?
Yeah, 135.
Look to me, just from these photographs, I would guess she was a bit heavier, but let me continue.
I was going to say that this is hardly a smoking gun, though. I mean,
no, of course not.
Yeah,
right, you're right. I mean, this is all preliminary, suggestive rather than definitive. Right. However, the importance of Gibson's work does not reside on Earhart, but on her navigator, Fred Noonan, where Gibson seems to have identified Noonan by the use of forensic facial recognition overlay techniques, exactly the same techniques we have used to identify Lee Oswald as the man in the doorway. In particular, Larry Rivera has used to identify Lee as the man in the doorway. Let's take a look. Gibson begins by presenting this photograph of Noonan and Earhart. Amazingly enough, the perspective of Noonan's head is little more than 3/4, almost the same as doorman. That is pretty remarkable, isn't it, Larry?
Yeah.
That's a nice one of Earhart, too. Gibson's control or probe image is this one. And there you see where Noonan is seemingly behind this sign, whatever it is, which we have enlarged. Go further, Gary. Yeah, go further. Right. One small caveat. Gibson could not find a photograph with the correct orientation or perspective for testing. But what he found offered the opposite orientation. So in order to use it, it was necessary to flip the image to attain the proper angle, which, of course, Larry, is something you yourself did in relation to your research on Lee.
Absolutely. Not only with Lee, but with Billy Lovelady. The original overlays that we did back in 2015 showed the only images that we can find of Lovelady, at least at that time, was the flip, the one that we had to flip.
Now that he had the gallery image, and in order to calibrate methods and validate findings, Gibson needed to first establish the symmetry of Noonan's face and cranium so that he wasn't introducing a distortion by means of flipping the image. With this test, Gibson proclaimed Noonan a suitable subject, allowing him to use a flipped image for his experimentation. You did a lot more, Larry, than what we're seeing here, but I take it you agree?
Well, actually, my technique was to flip. Remember, you may recall that we had the frontal images of Billy Lovelady and Lee Oswald. What we did was we flipped them, and then we combined them. Okay, and when we did that, you're looking at the same face. There was no deviation at all of features or anything, or more to one side or the other. They were pretty symmetrical, and that is why we were able to use them in our methodology to continue on. With what ultimately proved that it was Lee in the doorway.
With this test, Gibson proclaimed Noonan a suitable subject, allowing him to use the flipped image for his experimentation. One small deviation by Gibson consists in the fact that he superimposed the probe onto the test or gallery image, when the norm actually is to do the opposite. Regardless, by manipulating the opacity of the probe image, he was able to scale, tilt, and move the overlay until the main features lined up. In this case, the receding hairline, the nose, the brow line, the right temple, and the ear were primary identifiers, which seemed to match. The overall contour of the head seemed to match as well. Dennis, comments?
It looks pretty, compelling here. If you're going to look at this, and I mean, for
the symmetry.
Yeah, it's usually, some people's faces, interestingly enough, are not symmetrical. I had a boss that had a face where effectively both eyes were on one side of his head, but
really?
Well, it was pretty hard to talk to him, but without imagining
was that a birth defect then, genetic?
Yeah, and you had to be, cognizant of
sensitive to the guy. Yeah, that was
right.
Not intentional on his part.
But I've seen people.
I thought that this guy Gibson was a little bit generous, with his symmetry on this, because you can obviously see that the right or the left ear, if you look at it from the front, is a little, tilted to the right, and it's a little lower. If you're gonna nitpick or whatever, you can do that. But basically, he was satisfied with the amount of the symmetry of Noonan's face, so that obviously when he flipped over his image, he could validate his findings.
There's a high degree, but not perfect. We could do a superposition of the different sides and flip them and show that they're not, in fact, exactly the same. Dennis?
Actually, if you look at there's a couple things like the eyes, the corner of the eyes.
Yeah.
The angle of departure from the orb itself is different. Mm-hmm. If you look at the eyebrows, one is much more angular, the other more rounded. The ears are very strikingly not the same.
That's right.
And I think those are probably the non sequitur that kills us. And the other thing, if you look at it very closely, is the skull itself. He has. It's not saying that you can't possibly have a goose egg on the front of your face, because that can occur. But it's pretty clear that the characteristics of the forehead itself, notwithstanding the hairline, it seems to be a pretty good match. Is that the skull shape and the very fore of the head lends to the fact that he had kind of like an outcropping of skull,
above the right eyebrow, which of course is on the left here as we look at the photograph.
Right.
And he played football without a face mask.
Yeah, exactly. He ended up with an injury, but then. The other thing that is interesting here is that there's a good chance that if you take a head and you bifurcate it, cut it right in half, and then you take the two halves and gently rotate them on a vertical axis, you could end up with an effect exactly like this, where the ears, the taper doesn't appear to be very close. Not saying that you're going to have a nose that's 4 inches wide or anything like that, but let's say the hinge point for the two halves of the face is exactly the front. If you were just a degree or two off with the way that you presented the whole skull, you could end up with a disparity in how these ears appear from a frontal shot. So I'm not quite so sure how meticulous he was in doing this, but it would appear, as we look at the right-hand side of the face, that the outer edges of the face are much more recessed, probably by a couple millimeters, more into the anterior part of the photograph than the other side. which infers that, even though it was a good job of putting these faces together, you just can't take two halves and put them onto each other without having the direct right on the skull angle exactly the same for both halves. And this is not.
Now, Larry, have you already or contemplated applying your technique of creating a GIF, you know, to fit into the image on the original photograph?
Coming up next.
Coming up next. Okay, wonderful. All right, here are Gibson's results. Okay, there you see on the left and on the right, the original photograph. Go ahead, Gary. And clearly we're going to spend, it would appear, the whole show on this. He's getting a pretty good match there. Larry, you want to comment on it?
Yeah. See, a little problem here is that in the show, the video, it's not straight ahead, you know, so the lines, you know, those blue lines, you know, the little at an angle. But what he's doing here is exactly what we have done, you know, where you run the lines across to show, you know, to line up the features so that you can do your comparisons once you do the overlay. And he's using exactly the same technique that I do, except like I said, he's using the pro onto the test image, where usually it's the other way around. But go ahead, Gary. So we.
JFK Show number 158. We're going to be right back.
In Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade.
That's what we were told. Most Americans never believed Lee Oswald was the lone gunman, for excellent reasons. In fact, there were at least 6 shooters who fired from 8 to 10 shots or more who are identified here. We have, finally, the solution to the greatest murder mystery in history, laid out for the world to see, proof after proof after proof. Photos were faked, the body was changed, x-rays were altered, the home movies were fixed. 15 experts contribute to a 529-page book with 1,037 photos and diagrams in black and white and color.
Hi, this is Gary King. If you'd like JFK, who, how, and why, and would like to support the new JFK show, then go to patriotradiobooks.com. That's patriotradiobooks.com.
All right, welcome back to the new JFK Show. We hope you do go to Patriot Radio Books and order their new ones. We're really doing well with the new JFK Show and look forward in the future to Larry's new book.
This is what John Henry decided for this comparison, that he in fact had established that it was Fred Noonan, right, Larry?
That's right. And during when you're watching the program, this is where this Sean Henry guy, you know, former assistant FBI executive director, you know, exclaims, you know, are you kidding me? That's Fred Noonan, you know. I just want to briefly talk about this because, you know, it cannot escape, you know, that we talk about this. Sean Henry, you know, this was a pretty powerful position that he attained, you know, in the FBI. And he's coming out and he's saying, hey, you know, this could be the biggest government cover-up of all time, you know. And this is like, have you ever heard of a rogue FBI agent, you know, doing this kind of thing, you know, and bringing out, you know, the government as a cover-up artist. You know,
it was just such a naive statement for him to make, Larry.
Yeah, I know. So you know, so there are 2 possibilities here, right, Jim? Either he's a rogue agent, A, or B, it's an op, right? So I mean, what else can it be? You know, so basically, you know,
he's obviously not thought through the role of cover-ups by the government.
Yeah, well, what does Dennis?
He's either incredibly naive or he's putting us on, right? Basically.
Well, what would Dennis have to say about this guy? You know,
the psychological part of this is clearly that more than any other time, perhaps in American history, the government has gone to great lengths to try and portray most of the people in the FBI and DEA and CIA and all these other alphabet soup miscreations that are before us in the not so distant past that have ruined our lives. They want to make these guys look like they have our own best interests at heart. And when you have an FBI agent coming to the fore and saying, "Look, this is the biggest coup," and you know, and blah 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 blah, and there's never been any wrongdoing until this moment in time, the psychological impact on the morons out there is, "Oh yeah, okay, I believe that. That's about right for me." And they won't look any further at it. And of course, nobody can possibly believe that. But The only thing that he has done by making a statement like that is either displayed extreme naivety, which is beyond all possible imagining, or he's a country bumpkin that doesn't understand what reality is. One of those two things. And I'm not trying to throw him in the garbage and say, look, he's been discredited by what he said.
Yeah.
But if he's dealing with a matter that is as serious as this, and he makes an obtuse, stupid statement like that, goes in the direction of government never has done anything until this. God, what a ridiculous comment.
And he portrays himself like a superhero, you know. He's going to go and, you know, investigate this and find the truth, you know. But you know, the position that he had, you know, is just blows your mind. You know, this guy was
an assistant director, right?
Yeah. I mean,
9 out of 10 JFK researchers are working on the other side, so just mathematically.
Hey, Jim, I don't know that this has ever happened before, you know?
Was he in the agency when Edgar was running it?
No. This is recently. He's there in the photograph. Or if you, Gary, you scroll up. No, down. No, the other way. So you can see pictures of him. He's the one that does the documentary. Yeah, right there. The one with the shaved head. We got another picture at the top.
Yeah. So go up a little further, Gary. No, the other way.
The other way.
Up.
The other way.
There you go.
That's him. Yeah, that's him
on the left.
Yeah. Former.
Okay, now flip back down. Yeah. Thank you. Keep going.
All right, one more.
Yeah, let me read it now.
Are you kidding me?
We agree the features do seem to line up. Here's our analysis using a tinted overlay. Roll it up just a bit, Gary.
Okay, this is going from left to right.
Stop there. Go ahead, Gary.
As we always do the overlays, we go from 0% at the top left, and we progress to the right, you know, in increments of 10%, 30, up to 50 here. And as we go from left to right and top to bottom, you know, I just want you to focus here on the temple, the right temple, which is the left as you look at the photograph.
Right. Very consistent.
And another thing that and this is parallels our analysis of Lee in the doorway, where the nose creates the shadow of doorman of our probe, and the nose becomes part of the overlay, and the nose is in perfect position to cast that shadow. So here, what's happening here is the same with his hair. Was that a widow's peak? Is that what they call that? Or
widow's
hair,
peak.
You know?
Yes.
Right. Okay. And with the sun being in the position that it is at that time of day, that shadow is being cast on his forehead, and that's obviously that's the hair being cast there. And another thing, you can't see the mouth area, and because of the same position of the sun, which is consistent, you know, with the shadows here that you're seeing in his face, are all consistent with the sun being in that position overhead.
Now remember, Jeff suggested he might be wearing aviator sunglasses.
Yeah, I know, but I don't see that at all.
Dennis, what do you think about this comparison?
No, you'd get that impression looking at the upper left shot, but then if you look 2 frames over to the third one in the row there, as it's been lightened up, it doesn't work. But the thing that's pretty funny about this, and I'm going to kind of lend something to this that probably nobody's going to say. The edge of the darkness on that eye on the leftmost top photograph.
That's the probe.
Yeah, it comes on very, very hard. In other words, it's not a shade that comes along. It's almost too dark for a natural shading because of the sun angle.
Unless you were wearing aviator glasses.
That's true. I mean, you could almost, the shape of aviator glasses in those days, they were not quite so humongous as they are today. They were, a little bit smaller size, and conceivably that would work. But I don't know what historically was proven to have been taken on the flight, because obviously all that would have been, with them at the time was things that were taken on the plane, and they were very weight conscious. And I'm sure he didn't take 47 different pairs of aviator sunglasses with them. Not that would have been a heavy weight, but it would have.
I'm inclined to think that we may have him wearing aviator glasses here, but
yeah, it looks like a stem right there.
Oh, good, Gary, good. Yeah, and then the second one in the middle too. And
Yeah,
even over to the right.
I have to kind of concur with that a little bit in the sense that it does look like the stem from a pair of glasses. Without getting really good close-up shots of his face, shot from the side to see if he's got a distinctive part of crow's feet that comes off the corner of the eye and curls up and comes up like a stem, like you kind of see in the other lower photos here that are brighter. It really kind of does lend something to the fact that some kind of eye gear is being worn.
Now, Larry, do you want to create a GIF, the way you have in the past? I mean,
Yeah, it's coming up now, Jim.
Okay. Well, let's roll down then, Gary.
I just wanted to mention that the eyes and the mouth are not identifiers here in this exercise because of the shadows. All right.
Okay, right.
And I mentioned it here as we go on.
We do not think the mouth should be used as an identifier because that area is in shadows and the probe image does not seem to be smiling, much less showing his teeth. Perioral creases, laugh lines are not visible on our probe either. Despite this limitation, there are enough identifiers to allow us to support the conclusions of Gibson in a positive identification of Fred Noonan. Why is this finding so important? Because Gibson's methodology closely follows the authors. We published in 2015, also presented in Dallas in November of 16, down to the almost exact perspectives of the subjects in the symmetry test. It lays credence to the fact that the methodology is sound, from which reliable results can be obtained and most importantly replicated. Roll it just a hair, Gary. Right. Let's watch this for a second, Larry's GIF. Dennis, you may want to comment.
Yeah, I want to focus here on the bone structure, okay? And here we're talking about the temple, and as the GIF progresses, you see that the temple is in the perfect position vertically to cast a shadow there, and like I said, the hair casts a shadow on the point.
This suggests to me, Larry, that when you did the flipped image, you got exactly the right orientation of the head.
It's about 95%. He's a little bit, because I tested, very, very important observation. I tested, and it's a little bit, but it's enough. It's enough to give you a pretty good results.
Very damn close. Very damn close.
And the next photograph a little down is where I superimpose the grid. And now with the grid, we can take measurements, and do other photogrammetric comparisons as well.
Yeah. Good. Dennis, any added comments?
No, I mean, I think it's pretty good work that's been done here in the sense of
and notice the ear also. See the ear? If you look at the ear is in perfect position, and the ears are very good.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, notice how the ear, another thing about these GIFs, and I always talk about this, I always mention it, I forgot now. When you look at the GIFs, the animated GIFs, what you want to look is that the features do not move, okay? If you see the features moving all over the place as the GIF progresses, then obviously it's not the same person. But if you focus on a certain feature, just on that a couple of times, and you notice that it doesn't move, then you know that you've got a positive ID. And here again, the brow here doesn't move at all, the nose, the chin, So I think it's about a 98%, this one here, Jim.
Yeah, very, very good. Very, very good. The Lee Oswald overlays. As a matter of comparison, here's our Lee Oswald collage showing increasing levels of opacity as the overlay goes from 0 to 50%. The difference between the two is that our Lee Oswald overlay collage covers more identifiable areas than the Noonan overlay. Scroll it up just a hair, Gary.
Again, as you go from left to right, I think this one is very compelling because you can see the features line up perfectly. I don't see how anybody can refute this, Jim.
No, actually, when you look at this one, the thing that cinches it probably, more than any other factor is if you look at the eye orbs and the kind of like a lazy droop of Lee Harvey Oswald's eyelid as it goes down to the corner of the eye, and then how his eyebrow heads in the other direction and goes upwards, it becomes more, it reinforces over and over again as you look at this frame by frame by frame as these are run like this. In other words, there's the odds of another person in Dallas having the same eye characteristics as this man here that we've created with the science of putting these two together like this. It's almost impossible that you could get anyone in the whole, metroplex of Dallas, Texas, to have the same eye shape and eyebrow shape and the same droop angle, and it's the nose, everything lines up. The forehead, this is such a slam dunk that I'm not saying that I'm trying to sell it to people that are going, no, I don't see it. But if you look at it really carefully, especially if you stand back away from the monitor a couple feet, you don't need to be right on top of it, but look at it, a little bit more critically from a distance of 5 to 7 feet away. You can't possibly not see the fact that this is a slam dunk. This is probably the most incredible matchup photographically I think I've seen in modern times with a face.
Wonderful, wonderful, Larry. That's quite a compliment coming from Dennis.
Well, it's I don't see how anybody can insist that it's Billy Love.
And remember, this was the darkest secret the Warren Commission sought to keep from the public in the history of the assassination.
That's right. Okay.
The question that begs to be answered is, why have the so-called experts not worked on the man in the doorway issue? Could it be possible that doing so would jeopardize their careers, since most of them do contract work for the FBI, Secret Service, Homeland Security, and so on? We'll leave that up to the reader to make up his or her own mind. And here, Dennis, you see the gift that Larry created. And when you compare it with a Billy Lovelady gift, and you see how Lee fills it up hand in glove, and Billy Lovelady does not. The ears are wrong, the nose is wrong, the jaw is wrong, and so forth. And you appreciate the sophistication and discrimination of the method.
Yeah, Billy Lovelady isn't even close. It's just so tragic that anybody could even suppose that, let alone seriously imply it. So it's incredible that they try and put him into the picture where he clearly can't possibly even fit. They could have found anybody that was a better fit than him.
Well, we found him. We found him to the right. He's there in the doorway. We found him all right, All right.
Well, we got about 15 minutes to talk about The Shining and so forth. Dennis, have you seen the film The Shining?
Yes, and the thing that's funny is I haven't watched it in, I have to admit, probably more than 15 or 20 years since I saw it.
Well, just for this occasion, because Larry wanted to talk about it in relation to the moon landing, I found this one of the most tedious, boring films I've ever seen in my life, and that people talk about it as such a masterpiece of horror. It totally escaped me. I didn't find it that way at all. And parts of the filming were just very artificial. There's much of the dialogue is delivered as though they were in an empty room just reading a script. I found it very unimpressive. But the points that Larry wants to make has nothing to do with the quality of the film as a whole, but certain features that are introduced, such as use of the room and the number 237.
Yeah, and not only that, so many different subliminal messages, that Kubrick was trying to, not only on the moon landing, but also on, for example, the Native Americans, the Holocaust, So it wasn't only the moon landing that he was trying to, convey all of these, subliminal. Sure.
A new documentary, Room 237, explores a theory that messages are hidden in horror film The Shining. So what meanings do some people believe its director Stanley Kubrick secreted in the frames of his chilling masterpiece? Kubrick's adaptation of the 1977 Stephen King novel of the same name was released in cinemas 32 years ago. And this, if we flip back up, we'd find this was done. Gary, go back up so I can see the date of this. Yeah, 2012. Okay, back, please.
Right.
Thanks very much. The film follows recovering alcoholic and struggling writer Jack Torrance, played by Jack Nicholson, and his wife and their young son, Danny. They move into the Overlook Hotel after Jack is appointed caretaker of the imposing and isolated North American mountain retreat while it is closed for the winter. Tensions mount as Danny, who has psychic abilities and his troubled and abusive father, encounter the evil spirits that haunt the Overlook's deserted corridors in its sinister room 237. In an interview with French film critic Michael Clement, Kubrick said he hoped audience would get a good fright watching it, but some viewers believe The Shining is far more than a scary film. They're convinced the characters' dialogue, their clothing, and even the pattern of the overlook's carpet or codes. Breaking those cryptic clues, they argue, reveal hidden messages about the genocide of America's indigenous people, the Nazis' final solution, and even admission the 1969 moon landing was faked. Filmmakers and best friends Rodney Asher and Tim Kirk, who are both huge fans of Kubrick's work, explore these theories and others in their documentary Room 237. Archer said, "I was looking for messages myself. This project began because my friend Tim and I discovered that countless other people were doing so. And based on our love of Kubrick's films and consciousness of the great lengths he went to make them, the idea that The Shining was littered with these signs and symbols was totally plausible to us and something we wanted to know everything about." He added, "As I discovered more and more of them, it actually became a little frightening, as if I was opening up a book of forbidden knowledge. Doing most of the research between the hours of 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. made the experience especially eerie." Burial Ground, Room 237's interviewees include Michigan-based history professor Geoffrey Cox, who believes The Shining is about Nazi Germany's extermination of Jewish people. He can't be much of a historian if he still believes the Holocaust mythology. Professor Cox, who wrote the book The Wolf at the Door, Stanley Kubrick, History and the Holocaust, points to repeated use of the number 42 in the film. Then he wears a baseball shirt with the number on the sleeves, and others see a TV set shows the movie Summer of 42. In 1942, Nazi officials met for the Wannsee Conference to plan the genocide of European Jews, according to a certain narrative. Other clues to the Holocaust theory include Kubrick changing the color of the Torrance family's VW Beetle from the King novel's red to yellow, the color of the star-shaped identification badges Jews were forced to wear. Another interviewee, veteran U.S. television journal and former war correspondent Bill Blakemore, suggests The Shining is about the mistreatment of America's native Indians. Blakemore's evidence includes an explanation early on in the film that the Overlook was built in 1907 on an Indian burial ground. In 1907, the name Indian Territory, an area of land where the U.S. government relocated North American indigenous people, changed to Oklahoma. Later in the film, a frustrated Jack bounces a rubber ball off an Indian tapestry that hangs on a lobby wall. I found that scene very peculiar. Meanwhile, in the hotel's larder are stocked bins of baking powder branded calumet, the word for an Indian peace pipe. One of the more startling theories is that The Shining is Kubrick's confession to helping the U.S. government fake the Apollo 11 moon landing. Author and filmmaker Jay Weidner insists the signs are all there. In one scene, Danny is playing with toy cars in the hotel's oddly patterned carpet. He sits inside a hexagonal shape, the same shape, says Weidner, as the launch pad area of Apollo 11. When Danny rises from his game, a rocket with the lettering Apollo 11 on it can be seen on the boy's jumper, and he walks slowly toward room 237. According to Weidner, school children in the 1960s were taught that the distance from the Earth to the moon was 237,000 miles. Critic Clement asked Kubrick why he switched the hotel room number from the book's 217 to 237. The director said that Timberline Lodge in Oregon, which was used for the film, had a room 217, but staff feared no one would want to stay in it after the film was released. So it was decided to change it to 237, a room number that did not exist in the lodge.
Okay, sorry, Jim. Sorry to interrupt. Can Gary run that PowerPoint real quick now? It's only about 20 slides.
Yeah, we don't want to miss that. Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, this is the Apollo patch. That's obviously, from the Apollo 11 mission, and a lot of kids working on the.
Just as phony as the moon landing itself.
Yeah. Go ahead, Gary. There we go. Yeah, there's your Saturn V. Dennis, maybe tell us more about that one. We only got 5 minutes here, so quickly.
Yeah, keep going. Just go through your slide set, then we'll have Dennis comment on it.
Yeah. Stanley, go ahead. They talked about the room.
Yeah, we've got it.
Yeah, we got. Okay, any changes?
Next.
There's
237, right. Wait, go back, Gary. You want to comment about room number and moon?
Yes, because room is, and the end there sort of like subliminal there, tells you that moon and 237 there, you can spell the word moon. So that's sort of like a clue there.
Which accounts for the next slide where you're talking about the distance.
That's right.
237,000 miles.
But the Earth is flat, and the sun orbits the Earth at a distance of 5,500 miles.
Thanks, Don. We needed that. By the way, there's a powerful proof in terms of flight distances from a common location, Johannesburg, to different places. If the Earth were flat, you got a shorter distance to travel, and therefore the travel time will be less than if the Earth is curved. So there's a new proof that devastates the flat Earth theory based upon travel times from different locations, which take more time than you would have to take were the Earth flat.
All right. Next.
Yeah, talk about the pattern, the quilt, because notice the difference on the left and the right.
That's right. In one, it's enclosed completely, the pattern. In the other one, it's not enclosed. So there's some kind of message there. Go ahead to the next slide. This is what maybe Dennis can explain what this is here.
It's the launch complex, of course, but that's why the pattern, of all the different carpet patterns that could have been picked for that
I
hall.
know. Exactly.
Think about this for just 1 second. I've never seen that carpet pattern anywhere on this earth, not in Las Vegas casinos, nowhere. For it to be in this movie, basically trying to, in a certain way replicate the geometry of these launch pads at the site.
Isn't it too much of a coincidence?
Coincidence.
Oh, come on. We know nothing is a coincidence here. So that's not even worth asking, but it was done, in sarcasm, right?
Yeah. Correct. I mean, that's like I tell people, hey, I'm not a coincidence theorist.
Right, right.
You're going to get conspiracy theory.
And so you think it was a more abstract representation of the launch pad, Dennis? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And
the carpet pattern?
There's so many pointers here, and you have to ask yourself, in the aggregate, why would Kubrick have been preoccupied with it? We know for a fact that when he was in London shooting 2001: A Space Odyssey, that he got paid a visit by the Central Intelligence Agency during the filming. So why would the United States federal government send CIA agents to go talk to Stanley Kubrick in London, basically, in the UK? Do you think they went there just to have tea with him or have a chat?
Sure. Isn't that the usual practice? Langley extended tea in London?
That's right. I think they probably do it every day. That's another coincidence, too.
Yeah, and look at this jumper he's wearing. I mean, how ridiculous can you get? Apollo 11, USA?
No, and notice how his fists are bald. I think that's also some kind of message there. That's some...
He's angry about it. He's angry about the Apollo hoax.
Well, he seems to be kind of a little, he's trying to portray somebody that's a little bit more than miffed, if you look at it pretty closely. But here again, why pick a sweater with the rocket on it with Apollo?
Yeah, that's obviously very telling and very deliberate.
Yeah.
Gary, do we have more slides? You better hit them.
Yeah, just a couple. I got some really good ones coming up. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Now this used to be a Tang commercial, correct?
Yeah, Tang was huge back in the 70s because of the moon.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now,
that's what the astronauts drank on their flight to the moon?
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, God, how absurd is that?
Okay, now next slide.
And where'd the water come from they mixed it with, by the way?
And this is a scene in the movie when the head chef,
you're right.
the pantry where everything is.
You're right.
And
you're right.
I mean, come on.
Yeah, ridiculous. And this
is amazing. Dennis can tell us about this. Go ahead, Gary. Gary, go to the next slide. Projection. Go ahead. Screen.
Oh, this is an aspect of front screen projection, which Jay Wiedner used to expose that Stanley Kubrick had filmed it, had faked the moon landing. Fascinating stuff. It's just a question of whether we run over. Gary, is it okay if we run over, or do we need to stay on our schedule?
Yeah, we never really have to stop at an hour. We can always go over.
a few minutes.
Well, that's very quick. This is what front screen projection here is all about. You never see the front of the image, okay, because since it has to be layered the way it is, that's how it works. So, and many dentists obviously can.
Well, the foreground and the background are an equally sharp focus with front screen projection, which is optically impossible if you're doing regular photography using a camera with conventional lens. What else do we have, Gary? Do we have one more? Ah, yes. Well, this is what it's all about, right? This is what it's all about.
This is actually from Capricorn 1. And
which a film I love. That's a wonderful film that lays it all out. It's one of my favorites.
I know, and it shows multiple light sources and everything, obviously, and the way the shadows.
Now, who made Capricorn 1? I'm trying to recall. The acting: James Brolin, O.J. Simpson, Elliot Gould. But I mean, it's a wonderful film that lays out exactly how it was done. In fact, it's a brilliant film.
Amazing that it was allowed to be made. Go ahead, Gary. Very quickly, these are all screenshots from the documentary.
Yeah, that was Brolin and OJ on the right. Dennis, you want to comment on any of this?
The thing that's pretty apparent that when you look at the stereographic, parallax analysis that's been done on virtually all the photography, there's no disputing it that the front screen projection was used, and multiple light sources were in the studio. We know the approximate depth of the studio that they used, based on simple math, not trigonometry. This, by the way, this shot here is pretty interesting, and most people would look at it and not get it.
But you have to watch the film that he's produced. Hundreds of pages of manuscript, and they all say exactly the same thing. This is what you find on each of the 100 or 200 or 300 pages, where he insists his wife that she not interrupt him when he's concentrating on his work. And this is what he's been doing endlessly for hour after hour, day after day, week after week.
There's got to be some kind of symbolic link here. What do you think it is?
Well, I think I mentioned this in a show I did about the moon hoax, and the best I could come up with is that Kubrick didn't really want to do this. When CIA came and visited him in London, they probably didn't strong arm him at that time, but they probably didn't just lay it on the old the guilt trip of you got to do this for your country. My best analysis is they had to have something on him. That they were probably going to blow up or expose or maybe sully his reputation with if he didn't comply. And the action that would compel Kubrick to go this far in The Shining and render so many hints that he was very pissed off and displeased about participating in the hoax over and over again suggests that he really wanted to stick the shiv into the boys that paid him to visit and say, look, I'm going to have the last word.
The NASA, the CIA, and of course he didn't live long after he made Eyes Wide Shut, which was never released in the director's version. Apparently too much revelation about the Illuminati in that film.
Yes.
Which I refer to as the film that gave orgies a bad name. Dennis, I'm really glad you were here today. You've made a whole lot of contributions that were really right on the money.
Well, I don't really think I did, and the reason why is that the work. I got to throw some kudos here in Mr. Rivera's direction, because he's done amazing stuff with how he has worked with these photos, and it's astonishing. The kind of notoriety that this work will get, because it's not like cheap sleights of hand or parlor tricks here. It's just basic application of adding things together where it makes it very apparent what's going on. And I think that in future years regarding the the man in the doorway thing with Lee Harvey Oswald, it's going to become, hopefully, with what little bit of time we have left as human beings on this ball, that it'll be much more apparent to more people that JFK was murdered by the Central Intelligence Agency and the whole thing was covered up, and that Oswald had nothing to do with it because he was standing in a doorway far from the shooter's nest when the president was hit. And that if anybody can take credit for getting that out into the public more than anyone, I think Larry probably has to stand up on the stage and take the bow for that.
And in fact, there was no one in the shooter's lair. There were shooters at 6 or 7 other locations, but none actually fired from that sixth floor window. Dennis, I want to thank you for being here. Really sensational stuff. We want to have you back. Gary, do you want to take us out?
Yeah, let's just get a little quick comment from everybody. Larry, what you got to say as on the way out?
Yeah, I just want to thank Dennis for those kind words. I'm very humbled, by all this, and I'm just, doing my duty as a citizen and a human being, to bring the truth about what happened to JFK and Lee Oswald.
Don.
Yeah, if you're a flat Earth person, you're an idiot, and don't leave any comments in the comment section about the Earth being flat. Go watch this show.
All right, Jim.
Well, I just think this is a great combination, and that Larry and Dennis have both made fabulous contributions. And there's a preliminary introduction to Larry's work in the new JFK book, Who, How, and Why. And we have a book from Larry forthcoming from Moonrock Books. It's a few months off, but we can all look forward to that.
All right. This has been the new JFK Show, number 158. We'll see you next week.
In Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade.
That's what we were told. Most Americans never believed Lee Oswald was the lone gunman, for excellent reasons. In fact, there were at least 6 shooters who fired from 8 to 10 shots or more who are identified here. We have, finally, the solution to the greatest murder mystery in history, laid out for the world to see, proof after proof after proof. Photos were faked, the body was changed, x-rays were altered, the home movies were fixed. 15 experts contribute to a 529-page book with 1,037 photos and diagrams in black and white and color.
Hi, this is Gary King. If you'd like JFK, Who, How, and Why, and would like to support the new JFK Show, then go to PatriotRadioBooks.com. That's PatriotRadioBooks.com.